Okay, we're recording now. I'm calling this meeting of the Barrington Town Council to order at 7 p.m. All members of the Town Council are present. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight's meeting involves a couple of things. Primarily, we're doing this meeting because we have an obligation under the charter to provide our own budget. The town manager has provided his budget, and traditionally we kind of have gone off of that, and in the past few years we've made a few changes to that budget, but we kind of used that as a base for it, and we then present our budget no later than, I guess it's Saturday, to the COA. So that's the primary reason we hope to get through the budget tonight and vote on a budget that's approved by the town council for the COA. And we're also going to be talking about a virtual FTM request. So that's the first item on the agenda. So I think when we last left off, we talked about having a virtual FTM, and I believe one member of the council wanted to recuse.
Yes, I will recuse. Thanks.
Councillor Conway will be recusing from this discussion. But we talked about a couple of things. One of them is identifying various requirements for any FTM, for any RFP, for someone who would like to propose holding an FTM. But the other one, and I think even before we get to that, is we talked about trying to find examples around the country of folks who've done this before, as a good way to see if it's been done before, how they did it, and maybe follow along. And I don't know if anyone is aware of any of examples, anyone on the council is aware of examples that we could model ours after. Or anyone from the audience, if you want to raise your hand if you're aware of any. Okay. Well, I've looked and I haven't found, I found some things that were kind of like that. We talked a little about it in the last meeting. Lexington, Massachusetts had an FTM, but they have elected, I think, 100 electors who vote in the FTM, and they had a set agenda without the ability to modify it. So that was a little different, but they did hold a virtual FTM. Okay, so I have some requirements. Who wants to start?
I thought we had discussed providing all the requirements to the solicitors in advance so that tonight we could be voting on the RFP. That's what we had discussed and made a motion to do at our last meeting.
Okay, I did send mine to the solicitor. He is not here this evening.
The solicitor sent to Jim and Mary the information needed for the RFP, and that's what's attached to our budget tonight, our agenda tonight.
Okay. Well, I had some that were not included in that, so maybe they just got there after the fact. I got my agenda printed, so I'm gonna go back to there. Okay. So details, people and places, yeah. I missed this. So let me see if, does anyone have any additional ones they want to add to this? Okay, so what I'd like to I want to add the to the section that says all attendees, regardless of location. This is under expected features. In no particular order, but I would add that the attendees must be able to second all motions. It does say make all motions by any attendee. We also need to make sure that you can have multiple voters per IP address. So I would add that to that. In other words, you know, sometimes you have 2 or 3 people in the same household doing that. Let me see if we have with us this evening members of the Board of Canvassers who we've asked for input on this. Would anyone like to comment on the RFP or this concept? Okay, Rob, please.
Thanks, Mr. Carroll. I don't want to comment quite yet, but if you're looking for comments on the concept, I do know that there's a memo from Mr. Staples who's on the call. So I don't know if now is the appropriate time for Mr. Staples to provide his insight, or if you want to fully discuss the RFP first and then get into conceptual comments after.
Sure. Let's hear from Richard.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Rob, for inviting me to speak. I really based my response, my memo, on the Board of Canvassers letter. And what my point was in my memo was that the immensely complicated many steps, many of which I was not really aware of. I mean, I've gone to FTMs as a COA member, but the logistics behind planning, organizing, and hosting the FTM, as the Board of Canvassers need to do within their purview. I looked at that letter and I went, how would I, the moderator, take all of these sort of disparate channels that were being discussed in their letter and pull them together into a financial town meeting when we have this level of detail? And I think it's really important that the detail is legally binding. One of my ongoing concerns about the virtual space with an FTM that's structured the way ours is, to President Carroll's point early in the meeting when he said he looked around in vain to try to speak and find another financial town meeting in the country that was the same as ours, is that just as we may be hearing from residents who are perhaps advocating for this kind of technology to be used in an FTM, I think I could say with a fairly high level of certainty that if something goes wrong in the conducting of the meeting due to circumstances beyond someone's control, whether that's a technology problem or there's a procedural problem. My first year as moderator, so I'm kind of looking into the massive yaw, if you will, of this kind of logistics my first year out. I have a lot of concerns which are sort of toe the legal line as well as the logistics line. And as I had said in the last paragraph of my memo, I really come down pretty solidly, very solidly actually, on the idea of doing an in-person meeting this year, and perhaps next year until we do our regularly scheduled charter review. We could come up with a different concept that if our our situation by with about what be about 60 days from now, toward the end of May, as we start to think about a FTM that's pushed back about a month from the original date, that we may be able to host it indoors. And I think some of that also has to do with what kind of an FTM is it going to be. And I know there's been some information out in the public eye that we're not looking at big increases this year, so that could actually help us with attendance pressures. But to either feel comfortable enough with COVID restrictions to host it indoors in a large space within the high school with ancillary rooms, as I discussed at the last meeting, or to replicate what was done last year and have it outdoors. But I looked at the Board of Canvassers letter, and I actually quoted one of the sections in it, because I thought it's so important what they were saying about that it was actually be a much more complicated and difficult FTM as a result of trying to pursue the hybrid model. So that's where I am on my position on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Well, do we want to discuss whether we want to move forward at this point before we start getting into the kind of nitty gritty of the RFP? What's the council's pleasure, Rob?
I thought this was settled last month. We made a motion and decided to issue an RFP that we'd be voting on the final version of tonight. We've for multiple meetings discussed the possible challenges and potential drawbacks and what if this and what if that. And we don't have answers to those questions because we've delayed and delayed to find experts who can give us answers. And we should be finding out if a company can do this for us. And if they can, then we can evaluate if that works for the Board of Canvassers, if that works for the moderator, and if we want to adopt it. But soon we're going to run out of that opportunity because there just simply won't be time. And that's why I brought this up 2 months ago. So yes, I think we should move forward. I think by the end of this week, there should be an RFP out and we can get answers to these questions and then decide once we have the information, rather than taking this option off the table.
Vice President Hung.
Yeah, so I don't recall moving forward with a hybrid financial town meeting or virtual town meeting. And I don't know, and I don't recall voting to actually issue an RFP. I thought that the vote, and the minutes will say what the minutes say, but I thought that the vote reflected the due diligence to find out more information, which doesn't necessarily require issuing an RFP. If you're not going to go forward with something, it doesn't make sense to issue an RFP, in my view. I think if there are procedural reasons or other logistical reasons that, notwithstanding the best technology in the world or something along those lines, it would still make this as something that's not feasible, then I don't think we should go through the process of having an RFP if that's the case. And I mean, where I feel on this right now is I would love to have a virtual financial town meeting or a hybrid financial town meeting. There have been town meetings I haven't gone to in the past because of my kids or because of work or something else. So I think it's a terrific idea. I think it's something that at some point we probably will have. I don't think this year is the year for it. For a lot of the barriers that are mentioned in Mr. Staples' memo and the information from the Board of Canvassers, I don't think, and I'm just kind of talking hypothetically, for example, we just had an unprecedented election, which had probably the most access to the election in November than any other election prior. But that still required some form of verification process for people voting, for people identifying themselves and whatnot, all the factors that everybody's aware of, and in fact, some of the things that's even in the RFP. But if comments along the lines of, it's essentially running 2 financial town meetings at the same time to do it that way, when this is the biggest, most comprehensive meeting of the year, that's a significant effort that I'm, in March, I'm not ready to jump into a few months down the road. I don't think we're there. I don't think an RFP is going to answer all of our questions and it's going to get us there. I think Mr. Staples' comments, but I know Mr. Staples as an incredibly smart, hardworking, he takes his job very seriously. And he's also somebody who thinks outside the box. So if Mr. Staples, who has, I take it from the last meeting and this meeting, has thought outside the box, has come to this conclusion as our elected moderator, that carries a lot of weight with me. So as I sit here right now, I'm not in favor of a virtual or hybrid financial town meeting, even though at some point I really do want to see it, because I think the access that it will allow is what we need and is excellent. But again, I just don't think we're there this year.
Councilor Breyer, did you want to respond?
Yes, I didn't mean to imply that we decided to have a hybrid meeting. We decided to put together an RFP that we would vote on at this meeting, not the responses to it, but the RFP itself that we would vote on at this meeting to issue and get answers to those questions. I'm not ready to say right now that we can have a hybrid meeting. I think it's possible this year, but I would want to see the responses from the RFP that would inform us, from experts saying you can do this and here's how you validate voters and here's how they would check in. We don't have those answers now, and so it's concerning. It's pretty concerning how we would handle it, but the technology exists to do it. It's really just a question of how much it would cost, and we don't know that.
Okay. Councilor Costello.
I'm not inclined one way or the other to know whether the technology is sufficient or not. I am also not opposed to the idea of exploring the idea of the meeting. We are not, as Councilor Breyer stated, committed by issuing an RFP. It would be a process by which we would learn technical information, cost information. And I think that we are very likely, although I can't speak for anyone but myself, I suspect we may be likely to delay and not have the FTM in May. I further think that doing so indoors will make a lot of people in town uncomfortable, maybe not even a majority, but a lot of people, and so it's likely to be outdoors. And so we'll want better weather for that, and we will have time. But I in no way in supporting the notion that we should be exploring a hybrid, as I did at our last meeting, would suggest that we necessarily go forward. I feel like I would like more information, and issuing the RFP would be part of that process of gaining that information. I take no opinion as to what the outcome will be of that process.
Yeah, I have to say I'm tempted to seek an RFP because I'd be interested to see how people would overcome these significant obstacles. But on the other hand, if we haven't found an example, and I called for anyone to provide examples of any FTM around the country, I can tell you I wouldn't vote to be the first one. We don't need to vote to be the first one. I'm not wild about being on the bleeding edge of anything. And I hate the idea of putting somebody through the process of an RFP just to sort of satisfy my curiosity as to how you'd overcome some of these things. And it's because I don't think that we ought to be taking a risk like this going forward. That is, let's assume that we do an RFP. Let's assume that somebody comes in and says, I can do all of these things. Will we vote for that? Unless they could say, oh, we've done this before. This is something we've done before. We can absolutely do all of these things. I would not be inclined to be the test case or the beta testers, because the result of being a beta tester on this FTM, it could mean litigation for one thing. It could also mean an awful lot of work, not just by the folks who would propose to lead us in a hybrid meeting, but also by everybody else involved to do these meetings. And if it failed on that date, we'd have to go forward. We'd have to make alternative arrangements. I'm just not ready to vote to be the first on this.
I'm just curious, other than what we call motions and votes and the fact that it is a financial town meeting, how do you see it being different than an executive board meeting, a shareholder meeting, when anybody on gets a vote and only those people get a vote and folks can talk and ask questions? How is the financial town meeting different?
I don't know how it's different. I just wanted to find financial town meetings, which is, you can say they're exactly like that, but if so, why didn't somebody do this around the country? I did find an article about a town that considered doing it in Massachusetts, but theirs was different. Theirs was more like ours, and they felt that they couldn't make that work. So I don't know whether the software for a major shareholder meeting is identical. I don't know if they can do all of those things. Certainly, they have different obligations. They need to give it to shareholders. They might not. We may need to provide computers to people. So I guess it'd be different that way, but I'm not familiar enough with the software to say how else it would be different. Jim.
Thanks, President Carroll. I think the council needs to look back at their function and what their purpose is, and recognize that the experts, the people that execute this meeting year after year, the town solicitor, the town clerk, the board of canvassers, the town moderator, all feel that this is a terrible idea. And we successfully did it last year in the middle of the pandemic. This year, they're going to open up vaccines, and by April 19th to everyone 16 and over. That gives us 2 months. I suspect that we will be in great shape as far as that goes, be it indoor or outdoors. And the financial town meeting is such a quagmire with the motions, and it's not even like a regular council meeting. It's just so difficult to run it not being in person. And I think the council ought to listen to the experts and go with their advice as to how to proceed. And with the council, with the charter review, perhaps we can get to the point where we can do a virtual, because the rules will change that will allow that to happen.
Richard, please.
I forgot to mention earlier, just to let you know, my memo was drafted after I also had a conversation with Julia Califano, whose view on this was very comparable to my own. So I just wanted to make sure that, me being new kid on the block, that I did talk to the slightly more experienced kid on the block before I put my memo together. And Julia was kind enough to share her thoughts. I also want to say, if I may, Meredith was kind enough to send me the draft minutes that referenced what was being requested of the moderator and others in terms of putting these concerns in writing to the town solicitor. And I'm just looking at the language of the motion, and it says that a draft would be made available at this meeting tonight for consideration. So at least in the way I'm looking at it, I didn't see it as being, as I looked at it then, I look at it again now. I didn't see it as something that was required to be issued. It was something that was going to be considered by the council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl, yes, please.
I agree wholeheartedly with the idea expressed by the town manager, by Mr. Staples, Vice President Hum, and by you, Mr. President, that we have a high bar. There are legal ramifications. There are technological barriers. And so I have no doubt. I see that as a separate issue as to the merits of whether we go forward. I see this also as an opportunity to gather information to see whether it is possible, and I don't presume to know the answer to that. And so that's really where I stand on this. I see I understand that the complications and the general tenor of the opposition. But I also think that we could find out that it is possible, and with the benefit of our solicitors counsel, that it would be legal to do. And I wouldn't want to preclude it, but I would agree that when we get to the merits of having it, I would consider that a very high bar that a company would have to surpass.
Mhm. Okay. Um, So I wanted to give folks who called in an opportunity to comment if they'd like. So please raise your hand. Jacob, go ahead as we're waiting for that.
Yes, we had the very same questions a year ago, and I raised them again in a meeting 2 months ago. And if we don't go forward with an RFP now, we're going to have the same questions next year and the same questions at the charter review. And I agree, it's a high bar. It has to be a good solution. But if we don't even seek the solution, we're never going to get answers to the questions, because we're not going to have technology specialists on the council or on the board of canvassers who can have their company answer the question for us. But if we issue an RFP, we can get the answers, and maybe we can do it and maybe we can't, but at least then we'll have the information for a charter review. But the fact that we still have these same questions after a year of discussing this is really unfortunate.
I guess I just disagree. I think that's the state of the technology. If other cities and towns had done this, we certainly could say, okay, love the way they did it in Utah during the pandemic. That's fantastic. Let's use their software. I just haven't found that. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to make a motion to, well, I guess we should say, for purposes of a vote, I don't intend to vote in the affirmative, but for purposes of a vote, I'm going to make a motion to move forward with the RFP before we get into the details of the RFP. Is there a second to move forward with the RFP for purposes of discussion?
Second.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. As I said, I don't think, first of all, I don't think we could do it in the time anyway, but that's okay. If we're talking about looking at this long term, it's certainly something that we can, invite folks without asking them to put together an RFP that I can't see supporting. So I would vote against the motion as it's presented. I don't think we should move forward with the RFP. Yes, Rob.
Before we vote, just a comment and perhaps a question for Mr. Breyer, if he has something in mind. But I'm also inclined not to move forward this year in particular, but with this RFP. But I'm not opposed to revisiting the issue when we do have more information, rather than taking a look at it over the course of a condensed month, essentially. Who would this be issued to in the first place? I don't see that identified. I don't see dates and things like that identified in here. So who is this proposed to be sent to?
I don't know. I mean, we asked to have a draft RFP for today, and we don't have that. I mean, that was the motion last time, and it's not what we got. I mean, I know of event companies and things like that that I would send it to, but there's also a municipal RFP, dashboard that things get posted to. It goes out in the paper. It can be promoted in a lot of different ways. But no, you're right that what we have in front of us is incomplete, and so it is. Yeah. In terms of what the RFP would be, it's incomplete.
No, and thanks for answering the question. I agree that it's incomplete, but I do think it complied with the vote because it is an RFP. It's just subject to change in revisions. So I think in my mind, I'm not opposed with the concept of issuing an RFP at some point, but I think we're probably better served by getting information more informally first. And I mean, start now for next year, start now for whenever the charter revisions are up. For purposes of just getting this out, just for the sake of getting out an RFP, I'm not inclined to vote for that.
Any further discussion? Okay. Councilor Breyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice President Hunt?
This is for the motion to
To
issue the
move
RFP.
forward. Yes. to
Excuse me?
move- It's the motion
vote
to
nay.
move forward with the RFP.
Nay.
Okay. Councilor Costello?
Aye.
And I vote nay. The motion is a tie. So I guess we're not moving forward with that. And we can talk to our solicitor about it when when next we see him, but let's move on to the budget then. Jim, are you ready to give us kind of a run through on the budget, just as you did at the FTM? I mean, at the COA? Looks that way.
I have to unmute before I can share, sorry. Okay, can everyone see that on the screen? Okay, what I'd like to do is to review my memo that kind of outlines the changes in the budget, and then we can go to questions on any specific items that the town council may have on those specific changes or specific line items. And Kathy is here to rescue me at any time during this presentation. So the summary and impact is I'm proposing a municipal budget of $18,600,000, which is a 4.38% increase from last year. That $18.6 million represents 22.4% of the total proposed budget. The capital budget is almost 1.3 million. An increase, a decrease of 4.76%, and that represents 1.5% of the total budget. The schools, who are obviously are in a different discussion with the COA, but their proposed budget is 57 million, representing 68.6% of the budget, and that has a 4.9% increase. Our capital for the schools is a 0.5% increase of $388,000. And then most significantly, our debt is proposed at $5.8 million, which represents 7% of the budget, but a decrease of 35% from what it was last year. So when you add it all up, what the schools and the municipal side present is a 0.3% increase in the budget. And as I say, if accepted, the total tax levy would be $66,813,794, a decrease of 0.57% in the levy. I'll go through big chunks, departments. First of all, our labor contracts, as you know, they were negotiated 2 years ago. Fire department will receive a 2.5% increase in salaries. That's due to them agreeing to go with an HSA. And then the other 3 unions representing our municipal employees, the police, dispatch, and DPW, all will get a 2% increase. For the municipal side, the non-union side, it's a 2% increase across the board with no exceptions, is what my proposal is. We're requesting no bonds this year. The most significant bond coming in our future would be probably the high school roof, which will be the next year or the following year. And either next year or the following year, we'll have to renew our street paving bond, which every 3 or 4 years needs to be renewed because we do, well, last year, almost $1 million. This year, we'll probably do significantly less than that to try and stretch that bond as far as we can go. Board of Canvassers has a 46%, almost 47% increase. It only amounts to $15,000. It's actually a decrease in the budget, but they have a new item this year, not a new item, but a 10-year item, which is a $19,000 contract, which is required for the 10-year redistricting following the 2020 census. Computer operations requested increase is 11.86% or $20,000. And that's due to the outsourcing of our payroll to Paychecks. And this offset is offset with staffing changes due to the integration of the finance and tax assessor departments clerks. Tax assessor has a decrease of 29.4%, almost $40,000. And that's primarily due to salary decrease with the new tax assessor. He does not require longevity pay as the previous tax assessor did. So that goes down, as well as the integration of the clerks in the finance and tax assessor's office. Recreation department, we're requesting an increase of 17%, $25,900. That's due to increase hourly rate for summer hires to stay competitive. That goes especially for lifeguards, which is very difficult to find young people that are willing to serve as lifeguards. And we are competing with other communities for that valuable resource. Additionally, we had to hire, we have more people working at the beach. The beach hours have changed from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That was generally due to the pandemic, but we're going to start out that way this year. We also have increased cleaning requirements. So we've had to add a number of personnel to the beach staff, and that's what accounts for the increase in the recreational budget. Harbor budget is an increase of $4,500, moderate increases in the temporary help, which is the boat operators, boat operations, and mooring inspections. Public Works, the increase proposed is 8.18%. That's almost $205,000. The most significant of that is $143,000 for the hiring of 2 new personnel. As we discussed last year, Public Works is severely undermanned. We did a manpower study, and the proposal was to add 6 additional positions, and I proposed to add 2 positions for the 3 years. We did have 2 added last year at the COA, at the FTM, the 2 were approved, and I'm proposing to add 2 more this year. Other significant increases are $35,000 in general maintenance for landfill monitoring. That used to be in the capital improvement program, but that's an operational cost. So that's simply a transfer of that cost from the capital budget over to the operational budget. Also, $40,000 in refuge disposal due to increases in tipping fees, which are going from $47 a ton to $50.50 a ton. And once we pass the cap fee, it'll go from $80 a ton to $90 a ton. Refuge and recycling expense goes up 3%. That's the increase in the contract for the disposal with MEGA, and that's based on inflation statistics. Employee benefits go up 5.8%, or $265,000. That's primarily due to a 14% rate increase in medical insurance premiums. Insurance will go up 3.59%. Almost $16,000. There's due to a $14,000 increase in property and liability insurance. The good news is, as I said, bonded debt decreases by almost 49% and almost $3 million. And that's due to the elimination of that one-time increase in the principal we had to pay last year on the Barrington Middle School bond. And it's also a decrease of $315,000 with the completion of a building and recreation bond from FY06-07. Interest on debt is also reduced by 7.9%, or $250,000. And once again, that's primarily due to the reduction in interest on the Barrington Middle School bond. And our municipal requests, fire equipment increased by 14%, or $20,000. DPW equipment replacement decreased by almost 4%, $15,000. The pavement management, we added $30,000 to extend the pavement life through crack sealing, which kind of goes along with us trying to extend the bond on our paving jobs during the summer. Town hall computer technology went up $15,000, and that's for phase replacement of servers and computers. Tax assessors reevaluation was reduced by $70,000 or 50%. This amount will adequately fund the reevaluation program. It was overfunded in the past. Comprehensive plan rewrite is coming due. That increased by 150% to $30,000 for the scheduled 10-year rewrite. Harbor master equipment, we increased by $4,000 or 16%. Energy planning and conservation increased by 100% to $10,000. Public safety building improvement was reduced by 58% or $14.5 thousand. Park and trail improvements increased by 40%, $10,000. And that's to make sure we have adequate funding to meet those DEM grants that we do so well with. Barrington Bay Spring Community Center increased by 166.67 or $25,000. And that's to fully fund the exterior siding project that we've been trying to get done over the last couple of years. We've got the roof done, we've got the structural piece done. Now we got to get the siding up, and this will take care of that once and for all. Climate mitigation, we increased by $25,000 or 33%. Conservation land acquisition, we reduced by $190,000, 90%, and that's due to we bumped that up last year to buy that Soames property and the Harold Nelson Gibbs Woods. And so that dropped back down to $10,000. Building official replacement, we increased by 66% to $4,000. That vehicle's getting very old, and we only started this a few years ago, and we need to get some money in there to be able to replace that vehicle when the time comes. And then we added a new item, $65,000 for town hall paint exterior trim. It's in bad need of, there's some rot, and there needs to be some replacement and some painting of the trim, and the fire escape needs to be sanded down and repainted. As far as utilities go, town hall went up by $21,000, and you saw that in my memo, I hope. Most of that is due to the drought last year and the watering requirements and using BCWA water. I think adding the well, which was neglected with my proposed budget, to your proposal would go a long way with an ROI of less than 3 years to fund that well at $25,000. Tech center went up 8% by $8,000. Public safety building went up by almost 4%, $5,500. So that's really where the big chunks are, and I'd be willing to entertain any questions on any specific line items or any of the items that I pointed out there.
Thanks, Jim. So we can do this any way we want, but in the past, the way we've done it is just go around and ask the questions, and if anyone has any changes they want to make, we can do that. So I guess I'll start with Vice President Hum. Do you have any questions, additions, deletions?
I don't have any additions. I may have a few questions I'll reserve until later in the meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Councilor Breyer.
I've got one question, and then some changes that I'd like to discuss. The question is on page 24, so labeled 24. I don't know what number it is on the PDF. Miscellaneous income shown for budget fiscal year 2021 is listed at, I'll wait till everybody gets there. It's listed on this budget at $155,540. But in our current financial reports, like the one we received for February, it's listed at 125,540. And I just want to make sure it's a typo in this budget and not in our current financial reporting.
No, it's probably the combination of more than one line item.
So if you look at the February report that you sent to us, in that report, the fiscal year 2021 miscellaneous income line is 125,540. And on the proposed budget, it shows last year's as 155 instead of 125. I just want to find out if it's a typo, which one is accurate.
One from the financial statements is taking in different line items.
Okay.
So it's got a miscellaneous income represents two different things
On two different reports.
on two different reports. Is that right, Kathy?
Right, because there's, I believe included in that miscellaneous income is also additional 30,000 that the school gives us at the end of the year
Got
after we calculate their tuition money. That would be
Okay.
included in that line there.
That wouldn't be in the school miscellaneous?
No,
Okay. All right. So that was my only question. Then I have a few proposed expenses that I think are good investments for the town to provide additional services and things that we should consider spending. And paired with changes in some revenue lines that actually more than offset. So in aggregate, the net change would be a decrease of about $9,000 to the levy. I don't know if we want to get into discussing specific changes now or discuss them all at once, or if we're going to go through kind of section by section and discuss them there. How would we like to do it?
Well, I guess the way I propose to do it is just to identify which sections you have questions on and which sections each person would like to modify in what way. So why don't you go ahead and point out where you want to add or subtract.
Okay, so they're all additions, some of them on the expense side and some of them on the revenue side. So the revenue side is in the non-tax, non-state aid section, just about all. So it would be clerk, finance, building inspector, planning, zoning, recreation, library, senior center, fire department, police, animal control, harbor, DPW, interest, cell towers a decrease, and then miscellaneous.
Okay, so is this all sort of one combined idea? Does each one have a
Yes,
different?
yeah, it's one combined idea.
Okay, why don't you lay that out and then we can kind of go through each line item and fix that.
Sure. So I looked at the prior two completed fiscal years, and I looked at the average actual income versus the average budgeted income. And I took the average variance of those 2 years, and they were all significantly more than the budgeted amount for the current year. In total, it came out to about $500,000 additional. And I believe it's very important to be conservative with revenue projections. We don't want to be behind. We don't have a sales team that's going to be out trying to sell more marriage permits or anything. But if we're looking at what we've done in recent years, I think if we can use 20% of that large buffer, which comes out to about $100,000, to offset some new spending that I think are some good investments to make, I think it's still conservative planning, and it still gives us a good buffer for those non-tax revenue items so that we're not in trouble at the end of the year to fall short in budget. But it allows us to provide some additional services, to do some additional things on the operations side without increasing taxes.
So before getting into the individual line items, you're basically saying that our the manager's budget's projections for revenue are unnecessarily pessimistic, and you would increase that revenue projection in a variety of areas. Is that?
I wouldn't have described them as unnecessarily pessimistic. I think they're conservative, and I think we can leverage some of that to our advantage.
Okay. So why don't you, does anyone have any questions on that before we go to the specific line? Okay, why don't you go to the specific line item, and if you can direct us in the revenue section where you're by.
And so so this would be then that same page I pointed out earlier, page 24.
Yeah.
So clerk receipts going from 665,854. I would suggest increasing it by $2,281, which is 20% of the variance in over the prior 2 years. And so it would be changed to 668,135.
Jacob, which line are you proposing within the town clerk's budget to increase?
So all of this is a 20% increase, 20% of the variance. I can send a chart, but I didn't do it based on individual specific lines. I did it on the aggregate of the group.
Okay, because when we look at the revenues, we take a 5-year average. With the 5-year average, we also look at where we are as a point in time when we're doing the current budget. We also look at where we came in last year. And we take all those 3 ideas into consideration when we're coming up with the number for the current year. And revenue can fluctuate very much. This year, as you know, housing sales are out of control. So realty stamps and land recordings are way up. Those lines have been increased. Are there going to be as many sales next year? We don't know.
No, I understand the reasons for budgeting conservatively. I'm just suggesting 20% less so in order to keep taxes down while improving some services.
So Kathy, you do a 5-year average of the revenues, is that right?
That's correct.
And Jacob, your comparison was just last year to this year. Is that how you did it?
Yeah, the last 2 complete years, so fiscal 19 and fiscal 20. And then I looked at this year also. I mean, this year we're projecting to be pretty far ahead of budget overall, but more so than 2 years ago. But I didn't factor in this past year, 1, because it's not over, and 2, because it's a very different year than we've had. So the massive increase in real estate sales this year that has a very large impact on the clerk's revenue is not factored into the numbers that I used.
Okay. Okay. And Kathy, can you, I don't know if you have it in this form, but we have the managers, and it's a kind of overall category of town clerk receipts on page 24. That was the one that Jacob was pointing to, 665. Can you?
Page 26.
I don't even have to ask the question, you know what I'm asking.
I knew where you were leading to.
So this includes all kinds of things like the town permits, dog license, and so on.
Correct.
So could Could a subline be put in, I guess, for the sake of having something to vote on? Could a subline be put in that's miscellaneous town clerk receipts? And that line would be 2281?
No, it needs to be designated to a line item because that's going to be what the budget is for voting purposes. That's what I'm going to be doing quarterly reporting to the state regarding.
Okay, I mean, go ahead, Annalise.
Just rather than talking about the individual revenue items, Jacob, could we talk through the expense side? Because I think this is that we could get really into the weeds in terms of, to your point, if it's dog licenses are increased by $200 or whatever it is. But I think it'd be important for us to hear what the investments you think be worth the changes.
Sure. And I did come up with this, so it was mostly like a balanced overall picture, but I do think I think either side of these are worth doing. If we decide not to change the revenue, I think we should still do the expenses. If we decide not to do any of the expenses, I think adjusting the revenue is okay also. But the first is website redesign. I think that we should contract out and have specialists overhaul the town website, make the functionality better, the interaction better, the architecture, and make it so that it can be easily updated and staying modern. I think it's our primary communication tool with the public, and having a higher end website, I think, will make access and transparency much easier for the public.
I'm going to ask Phil to jump in and talk about what he's been doing. Phil, if you can unmute yourself and give an update on the website initiatives.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's on my phone. We've been working in-house on trying to assess our website and finding, doing like surveys on trying to test how the website is, how user-friendly the website is compared to other towns. And we've identified quite a number of areas where we can improve as we look into overhauling the website. And so we're trying to do this in-house, and we think we can get it done within a year. And so we're looking at doing a complete overhaul within a year.
Who internally has web development expertise?
Two people on me and myself, and the administrative assistant for my department.
Oh, Jacob, what was your proposal? Where were you proposing to put some money in, and how much?
Oh, so that would be in, there's a web development line and $25,000. I reached out to several companies that specialize in municipal websites, as well as some marketing companies that build pretty much any website. And $15,000 to $25,000 would get us a big upgrade on the web.
Can you just, I'm sorry, you point to the page for me on that?
I think it's within, find it.
On page 15 under contractual services, that's where webmaster is.
Computer operations.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be above that under finance. Third from the bottom in the finance, contractual services.
No, it's in computer, Jim.
Oh, I'm
Computer
sorry.
Contractual services.
Oh, I got it. Yep.
So is that where Jacob, you're proposing to put, or it sounded like you said something about web?
Oh, yeah, the item right above that is web development. I mean, contractual services is probably more accurate, is more accurate. It wouldn't all be
Software
web.
development. Is that what you mean?
No, oh, yes, that is what I meant. But contractual services is a more appropriate line.
Okay. Okay, so you're talking about adding to the budget an additional 25 to modify that to be, what is it?
To outsource the redesign of our website.
So it'd be 156, 450, is that, am I looking at that right?
Yes,
Okay. Why don't we do it this way, just a suggestion, make a motion, then we'll discuss it.
all right, I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion to add 25,000 to the computer operations contractual services line so that it is now 156, 450. Does anyone want to be heard on this?
If I
Yeah.
may be.
Annalise, please.
So I just have a question for Mr. Cunha and Mr. Herbie about the American Rescue Plan and if this would qualify for some of the funding that we could do in terms of investment in our broadband services and communicating with our constituents.
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question because we don't know the answer. They're talking big chunks. They haven't laid down the rules. They're supposed to be rolling them out within the next month or so. So the timing isn't really good, but we don't know exactly how much we'll be receiving and where we can spend that money.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
one of the things that I found, because we, at my job, we followed very closely the first stimulus. And the way it works is you have this huge bill and then you get to the regulations. So the bill sort of broadly, even though it's over 1,000 pages, the American Rescue Act, it's then interpreted by the various agencies that are impacted that then define and tell you, what this means. It may broadly say something, but then once it gets to the Department of Commerce or whatever, they'll tell you specifically. So that's, and I can tell you there's a whole lot of lobbying going on right now for various folks at those regulatory agencies. Okay, so we don't know if there might be funding available to improve our website yet. Carl, yes, please.
I think we do agree that we need a new website. And I have the deepest respect for Mr. Hervey. I serve with him on a number of boards and he does an excellent job at his job. I'm just not sure that his job is designing websites for the town. He has a vast array of responsibilities. And I tend to think a professional company would be well suited to that. And there are a lot of them out there. And so that I would lean towards outsourcing it as well, I would have to say.
Yeah, yeah. Rob, any thoughts on this?
I think I agree with what Mr. Costello and Mr. Breyer said in terms of the potential need for an upgrade, but it sounds like Mr. Hervey is onto something and is looking into it. I've worked closely with Phil, and I know that he runs these things into the ground and does some good due diligence, and I have confidence in him, and I'd actually prefer to save ourselves $25,000 here and see what Phil and his office can do, and perhaps revisit this in the future. But it sounds like Phil's aware of the problem, is working on the problem actively, and I'd like to see what he can do with it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry, a motion was made. Was it seconded? I'll second it, just for purposes of the record. Yeah, I would be certainly willing to put some money towards that. I think it's a worthwhile thing and for communications, but I'd leave it to the municipal leadership to, who know what's on Phil's plate and what he can accomplish and so on. to tell us if you want it. I'd be willing to support it. Jim, do you think we can do it without the money or what?
I'd like to give it a try and see how Phil. Isabel is a talented young woman, and I think she could probably do a great job with it. And we may be back here next year and say Jacob was absolutely right, and we need to outsource it. But I'd like to give Phil and his team a chance to see what they can do. They've been comparing other municipal websites to ours and getting a lot of good ideas from them and finding out how they're doing that type of thing. So I think they're on the right track, and I'd like to let them continue hunting that rabbit, and hopefully we won't be back here talking about it next year, and we'll all be happy with the site.
Okay. Any further discussion? Motion's been made to add 25,000 to that line item, and seconded. Councilor Breyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice President Hum,
Nay.
Councilor Conway,
I would like to see where the ARP money gets us. So I'm going to say nay for the time being.
okay. Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I vote nay. So the motion does not carry. Okay. So you mentioned at least a couple of things for additions, Jacob. What was the next one?
So the next is to add to the consulting line in the manager's budget section, the communications and access. And that's funding that we had put into the budget last year, following a council discussion on the need to improve communications and our outreach to constituents, to the community. And it sort of got eaten up by the pandemic and hiring of a crisis PR firm. And I'd like to see additional funding go there so that we can actually look more strategically at improving how we communicate to the community on a strategic basis. I think the addition of the weekly manager's memo is great. I hope it stays after COVID, but I think that there are a lot more things and ways that we can be showcasing what's happening in town, promoting our meetings so that we get more people to show up when we have opportunities like the community electric aggregation, getting people aware of those opportunities. And so I'm proposing that we add $18,000 to that. So it would increase it from $1,000 a month to $2,500 a month. And whether that's one consultant or two, depending on specialties, would be, at the manager's discretion, but using it to promote communications to the public and ensuring that we have inclusive language and that we're really welcoming in reaching out to the whole community and welcoming input from the community in a really good communications loop.
Okay. So I take it you're making a motion to add $18,000 to the town manager's budget under the communications and access line so that it increases from 12,000 to 30,000. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'd like to discuss it.
Okay, so you second it for discussion.
Second for purpose of discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would ask Mr. Cunha, what added value are we getting from the current consultants right now? That we, in going forward, what have we learned from them that now would be nothing new to us? Is there a purpose for having the current consultants that we have?
Yes, I think there is. They helped me formulate my weekly manager's memo. They have also provided guidance with some of the media questions and consulted with me when there were questions about how to deal with the media. That they've been invaluable to me. It's $1,000 a month, and it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, particularly we see it in the pandemic. There's just a massive amount of data to convey, and the trick is how you convey that in a readable form, and that's where I think their real specialty is, having somebody who does that.
As we come out of the pandemic, Jim, do you think it'll be as necessary, or is this pandemic specific?
No, I think we need to let it, as we roll out the pandemic, kind of utilize them and let them grow in what they're helping us do, kind of what Jacob's talking about. If we're not using them as consistently as we are right now for pandemic issues, I would like to utilize them in other ways.
Anyone else?
Well, and then just Councilor Breyer, if you want to flesh out what might be added by an additional $1,500 a month to the current consultants, possibly maybe opening it up for bidding, I would assume as well. And I'd like to hear that too.
Yeah, I would think the addition would open it up to bid to see what either a PR firm or an integrated marketing firm or marketing communications firm would suggest we do. I think there are a lot of ways that we can communicate more frequently, more effectively. And if what we've been doing for communications over the past year is what we're getting for 1,000, I think 2,500 would do the trick.
Okay, Jim, please.
I guess my question is, what are we doing wrong? I mean, Deb Page Trim publishes constantly, pushes stuff out on our social media, our webpage, our town council webpage, our Facebook page. She tweets, and I think she's doing a phenomenal job. I just feed her data, and she finds some on her own. So I'm not sure what we're missing now. I mean, Recreation does a wonderful job in promoting their programs. I think Council Breyer is alluding that we're missing something, and I'm not sure we are. At least not that I recognize.
Well, that's why I'm almost questioning in a little different direction as to there is no bigger fan of Deborah Page Trim than me. I think she's fantastic, and I've heard that directly from business owners in town serving on the ADC even before I was elected. No question about that. But part of communication, it's our job, and once we learn that as town officials, then I wonder if there's an ongoing need, and I can see that through the end of the pandemic possibly, but I question whether we need that beyond that. And it may be that I'm fairly new to this position, and maybe this is something that municipal governments commonly do. Does anyone have a sense for that? Are we unique to towns? Are we among a small percentage of towns who use consultants in this way? Or do we think that this is a common practice? I actually don't know the answer to that question.
I haven't done a survey, but I would suspect that a lot of towns do. I've talked to folks who've had major crises in their town, and the critical need for crisis communications, it becomes very apparent, or things spiral out of control. The public needs to know, and they need to know in a certain way. They need to be reassured, and all of those things. And there's an expertise to that. And the towns that have not relied on crisis communications make mistakes, and it's hard to come back from that mistake. So I do think it's necessary. And we're going to have future crises. I hope we have a few boring years, but we'll always have crises where we'll need advice. So it's good to have somebody ready. And I don't think $12,000 a year is too much for that, and for some of the other just regular communications. That's my view. Jacob, please.
Well, I'm not in any way implying that what Deborah's doing on our social media is inadequate or missing something, but it's not her primary focus. I mean, she wears a lot of hats. And when you have a consultant that's doing this, when you have professionals who this is their sole focus, they time things out, they build things up in advance on a timeline to get engagement. I mean, there's a ton of research that goes into when you're posting on social media, when you're sending an email. It's a real science for the experts. And that's not something that we can do in-house without somebody who's dedicated to it full time, because there's too many other things to do. You know, similar to why I thought we should have an outside company build our web. It's not a lack of confidence in Phil and his team's ability to do it. It's knowing that when you have dedicated experts doing it, you get an expert product that doesn't need to be woven into the many other responsibilities that people have. And I think often I hear from the community that they didn't know about certain things, or people don't show up, people don't know that things are happening. And I think we can do a better job, and I think it's worth the investment of improving our communication.
Okay, Annalisa, please.
So I would just ask Jim if he feels he needs more from the team he has now. If he's getting $1,000 a month of support from them, does he feel that he would benefit more if he had more funding from them? Or does he feel as though once the crisis of the pandemic starts to abate, that he'll be able to direct their attention in other ways?
Exactly. Right now, it's almost a stipend we're paying them, and we're keeping a running balance, and we're pretty much on target at the moment. You know, it's $2.50 an hour, and so it's 4 hours a month, and it's sufficient now. But I think once we're out of the weekly updates, or they simplify because of the pandemic, I think we can focus them on other things. More importantly, I like keeping them on retainer. You know, we have a tragedy in town, and we're going to need someone that's going to be able to communicate. The firm we currently use, they're the consultant with the PR firm for the Boy Scouts of America, and you can imagine some of the PR issues they've been having recently. They also do Quonset Point, and have done them from the start, and how successful that organization is. So I'm not promoting them specifically, but I'm just saying I think their expertise would be of great value in that unexpected time. So if nothing else, keep them on retainer. And if we got to throw some money in the bucket because we've got an emergency and we need their full attention, I like having them available. And they know the town, and they know the people that we're working with.
So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think she's asking, do you think you need more? Is that?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, motion was made to add 18,000 to the budget to bring it to a total of 30,000 for town manager communications and access. Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Nay.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Nay.
Councilor Costello,
Nay.
and I also vote nay. Okay, so that you've got, do you have other things you wanted to look to?
I have three more.
Okay.
The next is, I can't find the line, but I'll look for it while we start talking. It's adding $5,000 to the DPW refuse collection line. And it's actually, it wouldn't be for use by the DPW, but this would be to pilot a neighborhood composting program to start exploring if we can do composting townwide. And the way the current idea would work, and it's still being flushed out between the Conservation Commission and the Barrington Farm School, but we would identify a few neighborhoods where somebody would volunteer a corner of their yard where we'd have a large compost collection bin, and folks in the surrounding neighborhood could bring their food scraps there. And then once a week, once every other week, somebody from the farm school would come pick it up and compost it at their compost site. The $5,000 would cover the cost of the bins, fuel cost, and the time for the Barrington Farm School folks to do that collection over the course of the year. And what I like about this plan is that if it works, if it's effective, we can easily, for small money, add some bins and start spreading it out to more and more neighborhoods until we get to a point where we start really looking at doing something, some sort of municipal composting, if it's successful. But this was a kind of a good way to stick our toes in the water.
Right. Would that be, Kathy, is that under contractual services for DPW, or where? I mean,
Kathy, I was thinking general maintenance, because that's kind of a bin you could put it in if we wanted to add it somewhere.
I could
The
go
other
into either one of those lines.
I'm sorry?
It could go into either one of those two lines.
Or possibly agency support if it's going to go to the farm school, which is a nonprofit. That's just another, but it does have to do with the type of work DPW does, which is why I looked there first. But as far as an accurate funding line, I think it could also be an agency support.
okay. Yeah, Rob, please.
Thank you. A couple questions, Mr. Breyer. I really like the idea of a composting program, but in terms of maybe some of the research you've done, two questions. Number one, when you say the bins are small dollars, what are you referring to there? And then number two, do you have any sense, maybe from other municipalities or anything of similar size, how much a full-blown composting program would be within a municipality?
So the second question I'll take first. There aren't too many towns around our size that are doing it. A town in Massachusetts just recently implemented mandatory municipal composting. I think they did it during the past year, so I don't know what the costs are there. At scale, it's tough because right now there's only one composting facility in the state that can take any compost. The farm school just takes organic, not natural food scraps, not meat. So, anything that grows from the ground, they take. And so doing that at scale would be somewhat approachable. But the challenge with doing that is if you have people that are putting meat and cheese into their compost, it's going to create problems at the turning site. So at scale, I'm not sure what this would be, but that's why this approach allows us to test it pretty easily without long-term costs or changes in behavior. As far as the small dollars, the bins range, depending on where you end up going, anywhere from $80 to $150 to get them that are gonna be substantial for several people to be using out all year long, kind of in the open.
Thank you.
Carl, please.
I can confirm there's interest from the Conservation Commission on this. I cannot speak for the commission as a whole, and it is still being fleshed out, as Councilor Breyer said. But there's also community interest in it. It's relatively inexpensive, and we're a little bit behind the curve on it. I would emphasize it is purely voluntary, and the purpose of the pilot would be for testing, and so that to me makes some sense. We certainly wouldn't want to institute anything broader scale or anything mandatory at all. In fact, I think that the town that Councilor Breyer is referring to took the better part of a decade before they moved it up to the scale that they're at now. It took a long time to develop, but you have to start small and see how it works, see if there's community buy-in, and see what kind of progress it can make. And I think I tend to be supportive of exploring the idea for a relatively low cost.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of very different ways to approach this, a ton of different ways. I mean, there are already commercial services that will do this. Like if you wanted to pay, somebody will come to your house to pick up the compost, and for a certain amount, they'll pick up compost, and then once a year, they'll drop off the fully cooked compost. One of the things Jacob and I talked about, I recommended this a couple of years ago, was something on a model of Solarize. So in Solarize, we spent short dollars on promoting and negotiated pricing on panels, so that when a resident wanted to do it, if they signed up under our program, the more people that signed up, the lower the price went for everybody. That was the negotiated deal, and we got people enthusiastic, and it was a great success. So, I still think that is something that could work, where for an investment of some small dollars, we could get people excited about this. And I agree with Jacob that the tipping fees are going up. So the fact that we probably recycle more than any other city or town in the state is good and saves us money and is good for the environment. But if we could reduce some of the food waste that is going in there, we could drop those costs further. I don't think we need to make any, we make a little money on the recycling, but I don't think we need to make any money on it. It's mostly the cost avoidance that's the biggest benefit. And that could work in this case too. Was this recommended by the Conservation Commission, this format?
It has not been recommended. We're just, by virtue of the timing of our budget process, we've at this point come forth with it, but it has not been recommended yet. There is solid interest in it. We may have some Conservation Commission members who are tuned in tonight if they care to comment. But I think it is something worth exploring and going forward with, and letting them flesh out the idea for a pilot program. I think it's likely to happen.
Okay. Annalise, I'm sorry, I saw your hand up.
That's okay. This is another question for Jim. Jim, with the contract that we have now, that we have all of the various recycling things, could we set up some sort of compost bin there? Do they include any composting contracts as part of our existing contracts?
I do not think they do. They've just been sold, and if Alan's on the line, he may have that answer for us, but I don't see him right now. Oh yeah, there he is. Let me unmute Alan. Alan, do you know if Mega has any kind of composting program?
Right now, they do not. Nobody in Rhode Island right now composts food scraps.
None of the trash haulers. I know that there are private companies that do just that.
Exactly. There's one company in Charleston that does do it, private, but no municipalities, nor does MEGA do it right now.
Okay.
So if President Carroll, going back to what you were just saying about the solarized model, if people were to purchase, I mean, I'm trying to think if it's different than if it could be an individual versus a neighborhood and how that would work, an individual family. I personally have tons of coffee grounds that I need to get rid of every day. So I think of that as my biggest concern. I certainly wouldn't want to be the one in my neighborhood plugging up my compost. So just thinking, would it be possible to offer a reduced fee to residents who were interested in composting? And I know it's probably pennies and dollars here, but just still wondering about that.
Jacob.
So one, I think both of those can go in tandem. I think we could do the neighborhood version as well as find a solarized type model. I did on President Carroll's suggestion, I met with the Roadside Revival is the name of the company that does it. And we started talking numbers, and they wanted us to get to about 50 homes before they'd even come to Barrington, because they didn't at the time have any contracts anywhere near us. And so it would take about 50 homes for them to even take the trip out. And it would be double that before there was any kind of price break. So I wasn't sure how well that would advance. And then a few months later, the pandemic hit. So I haven't followed back up with them, but I do think that would be a good thing to pair in, because also even if this is a big hit, I don't think we would get to too many neighborhoods too quickly. So we still, it's great to have something, if we go forward with this, great to have somewhere to send, the other 160 neighborhoods that wouldn't have a bin, in walking distance.
So can I make a suggestion? Sure, Rob, go ahead.
And actually, I'll defer to your suggestion, and then I can comment after if that's fine.
Okay. I think because the Conservation Commission itself hasn't sort of voted to recommend something, and because we're up against it with our budget, why don't we put a sort of placeholder of $5,000 for a composting initiative to be proposed by the Conservation Commission and approved by the council. And that way they can say, if this is the one that they come down on, they can say, this is the one we like. Or if they've come up with something totally different, we can look at that too.
I would endorse it. I think that's a lot.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to $5,000 for a composting pilot program.
Can we?
Carol, currently under miscellaneous, the Conservation Commission gets $1,500 a year. That might be the right place to put the $5,000. If you go to page 23.
Okay.
And just increase them from 1,500 to 6,500 with the.
Would we still have the opportunity to weigh in on how they use it, though? I mean, they could decide something completely unrelated to composting. I don't know if they could. This is a question.
Kathy, it's sort of a budget thing. I think we could craft a motion that would sort of fence in how they could use it. But if it goes under that category, does that mean all bets are off?
If it was in your motion that it was to be used for a particular purpose, I think that would, be grounds enough, but I think it serves a better purpose than the DPW budget.
Okay, and would it be a new line item?
Yes.
And that is, can you?
Pilot composting program.
My only concern is throwing this program onto DPW's lap. I mean, certainly if we put it in their budget, they'd have the money. That's where the money could come from. But I'm not sure at this point, DPW needs to be running a composting program. I don't think it'd have the initiative and the drive that would be necessary to get this thing going, unlike the school farm or Conservation Commission.
What about in the town council section?
That makes sense to me. Rob, you had your hand raised, though.
I was just going to ask a question in response to what Mr. Cunha said. So I guess maybe and I'm just talking this through, I don't necessarily have an opinion yet, but putting it in the DPW versus Conservation Commission bucket, DPW is an actual administrative arm of the town, whereas Conservation Commission is an advisory board. So if it was with the Conservation Commission, who would actually operate it and implement it as a bunch of volunteers?
It's such a small amount. I think that if we put it under Kathy, could we put it under the town council budget and just add that in for a composting pilot program or something?
No.
Okay. So where is that? Town council, page 14, adding a new line after contingency fund. And I'd like to clarify the motion, and Jacob, if you can tell me if this is the motion that you're making, that we assign add $5,000 to the budget as a line in the town council budget for a pilot program for composting to be proposed by the Conservation Commission and approved by the town council.
What if it's just approved by both? So this has already been proposed to the Conservation Commission. So I'm fine. I think both bodies should approve of the program, whatever words are used to get there. I'm fine with that being the motion.
Okay, I think if they, so they would propose it to us.
Propose it to us. Okay.
And then we would,
That's
if
fine.
we're good with it, we would just release the funds.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
So I make,
You want to consider putting that under the council contingency fund instead of creating a new line item?
Is it a
And
problem
just
to create a new
council.
line? I think it's not, I'd rather create a new line just for this year because I don't want the COA to think that we're getting a cappuccino machine for the council chambers or something.
All right, I'll cancel the order.
Okay, a motion's been made and I will second it. Any further discussion? Eileen Small would like to speak. If you could unmute Ms. Small.
Hi, this is, oh.
We
Let
can hear
me-
you.
Hold on. There's a, shoot. 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Is there an echo?
very, very slight. We can hear you fine.
Okay. I'm from the Conservation Commission. So hold on 1 second. Let me try my computer audio because there's a terrible echo. 1 second, okay?
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Now there's
Okay, now I shut off my phone and I'm just on my computer and there's no echo. Yay, sorry folks for the technical difficulties.
No.
So I am a part of the Conservation Commission and I don't mean to speak for the whole council, but we would be very, I think we would be very happy for the $5,000 for the pilot program. We have been discussing that. We haven't been discussing the specifics that Councilman Breyer had spoken of about the neighborhood pickups. But it sounds like a very interesting idea. We had discussed possibly putting a bin at the recycling center and having the town farm folks pick up from there. I don't know if you're aware that they pick up at a number of the schools in town, and they've been doing that for many years. So this would just be in addition to that. And I think the neighborhood idea is very interesting. I do believe at the next Conservation Commission meeting, we will be having someone from the town school coming. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that and say we very much welcome the money. We do also have a small budget, so we do manage a small budget. When someone was, I think it was Vice President Hum had spoken about whether we manage any money. We do have a small amount of money that we do manage successfully. So I also wanted to mention that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I was aware that the farm school has an incredibly sophisticated program. You can ask them how much in terms of weight of compost they got on a particular day, and they've got records. They weigh it from each school so that they can look at the averages and things like that. It's really impressive, and they're doing it as volunteers. So
yeah, I just want to say they are fantastic, and I have been composting with them for several years now, and I'll tell you, it's reduced my trash quite a bit. So if we could get more people in town to do that, I think you would really see a decrease in the amount of trash being picked up. So that's another plus.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So we had a motion and it was seconded. Did we didn't vote yet. Any further discussion? Okay, Vice President Hung, yes, please.
Only small item of discussion, since we have Ms. Small on the line. It doesn't need to be part of a motion, but if while they're looking into this proposal, if they can look into a potential outreach program for it too, just to help spread the word on that, would be terrific.
Sure.
But in any event, I'm ready to vote when everyone else is.
Great.
Okay. Vice President Hung, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Costello,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. Great. Okay. What was the next? You had two more items, I think, Jacob.
Yes, so the next is, I don't have the line item for this one yet, but it's increase of $12,500 for AV equipment in the council chamber. Now I know that this is something that had been looked at about a year ago, again, before the pandemic, about changing the cameras and some of the display hardware in there for when we're having council meetings, so that presentations are a little better for the folks who are there. And I think now, especially that folks have grown accustomed to participating from home, people, I think, would have the expectation to at least be able to watch the council meetings live, if not be able to participate remotely. And so I want to have some money in the budget so that when we do go back into the chamber to meet, that we'll be able to make those upgrades.
Good.
Could I ask Mary to give you an update on where she is with this?
Hi, I've been researching and working with a company called Connectivity, and they've put out a proposal. I waited because we were ready to go, and then because of the Zoom, I wanted to do further research with our think tech. So I've got the proposal for the video streaming. I just need to get together and look at that project a little bit further with think tech to make sure that everything would go smoothly. Right now, I believe the video equipment would be about $8,650. But I haven't gotten together with think tech yet because of the election. So getting closer. And the other thing I wanted to do is with Clerkbase, you can timestamp your minutes. So if you are looking for virtual FTM, you'd have a timestamp on that. So you're not like going through the whole thing. So I'm trying to get there. So that's where I am.
And the 8650 that you mentioned, I won't hold you to that because that money, is that in the budget or no?
No, I think I can use I have a special fund. When you record documents, you have a document preservation, about 10%. So I have some money in that bank account, shall we say.
Okay. And Kathy, I don't know if you're, or maybe Mary, the dollar amount, would that be sufficient to?
Right now, yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Jacob. What hardware does that include? Is that just the video for streaming, or would that also be presentation screens in the chamber itself? So right now, there's one big TV.
That's right.
Would there be anything else people can?
Yeah, I think we want to add another television screen. As I said, that's when Think Tech is coming. We're supposed to be getting together, the 3 or 4 of us, these different companies. So, yeah.
Jacob, one of the things that, besides one extra monitor, is I'd like to put in 2 small monitors in front of the council desks so that you can look at a presentation in front of you, kind of floor level, slanted up at you so that you can watch it. That's something that I think would be of value to the council in particular, instead of trying to crane your neck looking at a TV monitor on the side of the room.
And do we think that we already have enough money to make that happen? Or do we, I guess the question is, Jacob's proposing some money for that. Do we need that?
The preservation of records, it could come out of that special account. Is that true, Kathy? Do you know?
Yes, out of your TP account.
And how much is in that account?
There's a lot in there.
I think she's telling you there's enough in there.
Enough for the additional screens as well? Okay. All right, then I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't even make a motion on that one, but.
Related, just on sidebar, is one of the issues that we're confronting is OMA legislation that's going to require all boards, committees, and commissions to meet virtually through the end of 2023. And there's a lot of pushback because obviously trying to do every board and commission and committee virtually would be difficult. But I think we need to upgrade the town council because, hybrid and OMA requirements are going to come upon us. So it's better to get going on it now.
I think we're definitely going to have. I think we'll probably end up still doing live council meetings once this is over, but with the folks coming in from virtually. So, okay, you had something else, Jake.
Yes. So the next one we should discuss before a formal motion because it would hit many budget lines. And this is, I value human labor and human time significantly and more than the state currently values it. And I believe that anybody working to deliver the services to our residents, to take care of our facilities and to provide the community that we have in Barrington deserves to be paid $15 an hour as a minimum. And so I would like to add money to the budget that will allow us to set a municipal minimum wage of $15 an hour. And the cost to do this would be $32,000. And that includes payroll tax.
I support the idea of a $15 minimum wage. I think that's a great idea. I just think it's a major initiative to bring up tonight without looking at all of the knock-on effects. And I think I for one would like to kind of study it because you have the situation where I don't know, I'm making this up. The assistant cook is making $13 an hour and the head cook is making $15.25. What do you do for the head cook? Do you just keep him at $15.25 while the assistant cook comes up to 15, or do you bump it by $2 for them too? And other potential effects that I haven't considered. I think this is an initiative worth doing. I just think we ought to spend a little bit more time looking at it than one night. And I haven't had a chance to kind of analyze those numbers anyway.
So I'm not proposing the specific path to it. I'm proposing putting the money in the budget so that we can do it. And I think most of the specifics would be hammered out by the town manager because it's a management question of how to stratify your workforce. But I think that we should have the money in the budget so that we can pay a minimum wage of $15 an hour.
So does that money that you propose, does that include raising anybody who's above $15 an hour?
It includes raises for everybody who is at or below $16 an hour. And then my thought for an ordinance would be that it would be a good way into the year before it fully takes effect. Because the number of hours we're talking about and the number of people this impacts isn't huge. So even just waiting a few months gives you the room to bump some people up either sooner or to bump people up a little more and others a little less. And so to phase it in over the course of the year, but without having the money there, the decision to do it is taken off the table.
Vice President Hom.
Maybe a question or two and then a comment, but from some of the materials that I think we've seen from your inquiries, would this include like part-time or summer jobs like lifeguards and camp counselors and whatnot?
Yeah, it would include anybody who's employed by the town.
So my comment is I'm not comfortable in voting for that tonight. And I think it's putting the cart before the horse if we were to vote to put the money in and then come up with a plan afterwards. So I agree with what Mr. Carroll said in terms of if we're going to vote on this, we need a lot more information first, in my opinion.
Anyone else? Councilor
I would be supportive of a $15 minimum wage. I would like to know what would be the process of getting there. The danger is if we surpass the budget process, then we go for another year with the given situation we have. And so I would be interested in knowing the process we would undertake to do this properly while not being hamstrung by virtue of the fact that we have a time element presently. And can anyone address that on the council, or possibly you, President Carroll?
Unfortunately, we do our budget once a year. If we brought this up a couple of months ago and we could do some more in-depth analysis, I would feel more comfortable. But I just saw some numbers last week. I haven't looked at anything in terms of what this means for folks who are at 16 or higher, and I don't even know that there might be other implications for this. So I just assume really kind of dig into it. It's kind of a major initiative. It sends a strong signal. I like it. I just think we ought to give it more thought than just one night without any materials.
One further complicating factor is that we're in the process of doing all our summer hiring right now. We've already advertised at a particular wage. And so trying to change that midstream would be difficult. I think the perfect timing would be to do it, before the beginning of the hiring season, when most of those people at that lower wage level are hired. We can have the biggest set and we can see what the impacts are over, studied over the next 6 months or so. I brought Mary Ann into the conversation. I don't know if she has anything to say about this.
Yeah, one of the things I'd be concerned about is just that if we brought the summer help in at the $15 an hour minimum, and some of our, existing returning staff would be saying, gee, I didn't even make that last year, and they'd be expecting more money this year. I mean, our highest paid summer staff is going to be about $14.50. So that's going to be a big deal to change it now.
Councilor Costello.
I can see that, but can I get a sense for whether colleagues and the town manager are willing to explore implementation as opposed to, or if they are, in fact, if there may be those who are actually opposed to the concept. I don't think that I necessarily want to force this without the level of investigation and understanding that it requires. However, I think in principle, it's where we need to go as a municipality, and something closer to a living wage in a town such as this it is our moral imperative to support. And so, rather than putting the cart before the horse, I understand the concerns. Can I get some level of commitment that we will in fact investigate, explore, and figure out a way to implement over a proper time frame and with the proper safeguards. I like a sense from my colleagues on that before voting anything like this.
Yeah, I haven't decided about the issue of whether the lifeguards and the summer seasonal folks, whether I think we should make an exception to that or not. I think that's worthy of discussion, and I am committed to the idea of a $15 an hour wage for year-round workers. But I'd like to understand the implications of that and the true costs of that, as Mary Ann kind of alluded to, and consider the issue of the summer help too. So I'm committed to that.
I think you could do it by motion to direct us to do that, but I could certainly make a commitment that Kathy and Mary Ann and I will put together. I mean, Mary just texted me, our poll workers are making $11.50 an hour. So, that's another group to bring in. So I think we need to take a look at it, and we will do that and try and come up with a scheme that would bring the lowest employees to 15 and then everyone else somewhat increased, probably not to the same level as some of them, but and what the true cost of that would be. And it could be implemented for next year's budget if the council so chose.
I think that'd be great. I guess I would wait, because I know that this might involve some analysis, financial analysis, and I'd hate to kind of I know budget season is the worst time of year for Kathy. It's the busiest. So if we could look at it later in the summer, I think that'd be fantastic. That's just my view. I don't know how other members of the council feel.
What about the thought of reducing the amount so that funds would be available, so we could set a target for January 1st, 2022 to have a $15 an hour minimum wage by then? We could reduce this by, would need to be a little more, reduce it by probably 40%, would leave half a year to stratify it more. So you'd have $15 an hour for the lowest earners, which are the largest cost to bring up to 15%, or to bring up to $15. So you have the people at, $14, $15, $16 don't have to move as much because they're already at a livable wage. So if we reduce it by 40%, then we have the funds available to start this for January 1st. Leaves us plenty of time. It's 9 months to do some research and analysis as to how to effectively implement it. But then we're not waiting a full 15 months from now to get started.
I don't understand. Why would it be 15 months from now?
Because until the 2023 budget starts, so it would be July 1st, 2022 before this got started. I mean, if this is in now, it doesn't take effect until July 1. There's a lot of time already, but I understand the reluctance to put the cart before the horse. So a smaller cart before a pony maybe would allow us to move forward and give plenty of time to plan it.
I think that's plenty of time to plan. My only question is, I don't know what the cost is. When you look at the people above 15 that you've got to equally raise, we don't have a handle on that cost at this point. And reducing that by 40% and directing us to go to $15 an hour in January, there may not be enough money to do that. I don't know that.
Yeah. So I just, you know, with a kind of a major initiative and a good one, it's just requires more circumspection, in my opinion. Do you want to make a motion that we, well, I don't know. Do you want to make a motion, Jacob, and then we can vote on that?
Well, I guess I have the intention that by January 1st, 2022, I will have proposed that we establish a municipal minimum wage of $15 an hour. I think we need more money in the budget in order to cover that. So I don't know what motion would be appropriate aside from what's in here to accomplish that. We can work out the details if it sounds like there would be support for that motion, but I don't know that we need to work out the details if the motion's just going to fail.
Well, I guess I don't think anybody knows how much money that's going to cost.
But we can pick how much money it's going to cost, right? Like we can set an amount that we know it can't exceed. And so that might mean that some of the people in the middle who are currently making $15.50 or $16.50 an hour wouldn't get the same level raise until the next budget season. But the people who are making below a livable wage at least don't have to wait the additional 7 months.
Well, so your point is well taken. The idea of sort of hashing out the details if we're not going to go forward. Why don't we talk about it that way? Do we want to move forward and try to you want to make a motion to continue this discussion toward a further motion to add money to the budget, and then we can just see if people want to.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, I'm seconding that motion. And any further discussion on that? Yes, Rob, please.
I apologize for being dense, but only that I don't understand the motion. What are you proposing that we do?
So the idea, Jacob's pointing out, rightly so, that before we get into the nitty gritty details of how much we should add to the budget and that sort of thing, we should decide whether people want to add anything to the budget for this purposes this year. And if the answer is no, then we don't need to further explore it. So that the motion is whether we continue talking about this. And if that passes, then we'll talk about how much money to add for this year's budget. Does that make sense?
Yes, so that makes sense. I'll talk through my question with that, in that I'm very much open to continuing to talk about it, and I see some value in talking about it with respect to some of the full-time and day-to-day employees. You pointed out concerns, Mr. Carroll, that you have with respect to seasonal and temporary employees. And I share those concerns, at least for now. So I don't want to commit to doing anything when I may not, you know, once I have a picture of what it's going to cost and what it's going to entail and all the factors involved, I don't know how I will vote then. So I don't want to be tied to what I say now, and then, you know, a month or two or whenever it is down the road, say, whoa, that's not what I meant. So I don't know if I'm explaining that the right way, but and you know, maybe it's just me still not understanding exactly what that motion would do. But
so just the first motion would be, do we want to add any amount to this year's budget? Jacob, tell me if I'm wrong. Any amount to this year's budget for the purpose of achieving a $15 minimum wage this, I shouldn't say this year, for the purpose of achieving a $15 minimum wage by January 1, 2022.
Understood. That I think that makes it clear with that explanation, and I wasn't picking up on that that earlier, so I apologize.
Okay. You want to call that your motion, Jacob, if I've said that correctly?
Yes,
Okay,
that's my
and
motion.
I second that. So Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
And again, before I vote, just a comment. In my opinion, I know what you're trying to do, and I think the work is necessary. But again, in my opinion, I think it would be irresponsible to vote on an amount of money before we have all the facts in front of us. So I don't know if you want me to vote or allow for rebuttal comment, but I'll leave it to that.
Oh,
Okay, I guess unless there's further discussion, we should vote.
Yeah.
Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Nay.
Councilor Breyer,
aye.
Councilor Conley,
So for clarification, because I have the same concerns that Vice President Hum did, and I'm sorry, in terms of, I'd like to work out the details before I commit to a dollar amount that we add to the budget. And I think part of that is, do we include seasonal and part-time help? Part of it is who's exempt, who's not. So I believe I have to vote nay because I am not sure that I would support it without knowing what the dollar amount is. And I don't think we can know what the dollar amount is without the research. However, I think we should bring this back up again. I have concerns saying, we'll play to a dollar amount. If we add 30,000, then we're restricted to 30. If we add 50, then we could say we have 50 we could add. So I just have a really difficult time with that specific approach.
okay. So your vote is nay, is that correct? Okay. Councilor Castel,
In the interest of making progress towards the goal and knowing that it isn't fully fleshed out, for that reason, for that purpose, I'm going to vote aye.
okay. And I vote nay because I think we need to explore this. It's a major initiative. It's worthy of more discussion than we can give it, more analysis than we can tonight. Okay. Jacob, did you have any other adds to the budget?
No, we can, oh, well, the revenue side, but we can let everybody else go through if they have anything and then come back to that.
Well, I guess let's talk about the revenue side too. My overall concern is that Kathy's been doing this quite a while, and the process that she goes through with Jim, and Jim I think calls it a stress test for the 5-year average. I'm inclined to go with what their analysis is. Maybe it's overly conservative, but I think it's served us well so far. So I before we kind of go into each line, let's discuss that overall concept and just get a sense from the council what you think about that. My inclination is to stay with what the prediction of our finance director, CPA, and our town manager as to what the revenues will be, because based on their way of doing it, I think that's probably our best bet, our best guess. Anybody on the council want to address this? Sure, Rob, please.
And just only to say that I agree with that approach. I think that's the prudent approach to stick with the hard work that Ms. Raposa and the rest of the team has done. So I'd be in favor of keeping the revenues as is based on the current assumptions.
Okay.
I have a question about it. Would we have to then take expense from somewhere else or no?
Basically, Jacob is saying he thinks we'll get more revenue for certain things.
Right. But if we don't increase the revenue, we don't need to remove an expense from another place because of the $5,000 that we increased.
Yeah.
Right, I was looking to have basically a balanced overall proposal.
Right.
But
Right.
there's no reason why we
Right.
now need to find
Okay.
$5,000 because we added in the composting pilot. That just, the tax levy is just now $5,000 more than it was.
Right, okay. Yeah, as someone whose day job is dependent on revenue and knowing I'd rather have the money in the hand and I'd rather be conservative with revenue and overestimate on expense, so.
Okay. Carl, do you have a view on this?
My sense is again, I'm always looking for more data and information. I tend to go with the experts on this as I think about it. And I would like to have a little more history going back maybe a decade as to where the estimates have been versus the reality with regard to revenues. But I don't feel that I have enough confidence at this point to make a change. And so I would stand with Councillor Conway and Vice President Hom on this.
Okay, and I agree with that. I just think, Kathy's in the best position. Kathy and Jim are in the best position to know, and they're considering a lot of things that we'd like them to. Do you want to make a motion, Jacob, to?
No.
No? Okay. Okay. All right, then. So Annalisa, do you have questions, comments, additions, subtractions?
The only question I have, I'm going to be the spokesperson for the American Rescue Plan, but my only thought is just, I hope that there is funding within that program as the details are worked out for some of the mental health support for our kids. That would be my biggest concern is, do we have, my biggest question was, do we have enough funding for our recreation department? Do we have enough services for our kids? I know I've reached out to Jim to talk about potentially increasing some of the recreational services that are offered to kids. And I'm hoping that there's more in the Biden funding that will allow us the discretionary funding to give the kids some support. But I'm not prepared to say we have specific line items that need to be increased for the recreation department.
Okay. Okay. Councilor Costello. Questions, comments, additions, deletions?
Yeah, last year I did, I voted for TR's meant to add 2 DPW workers. And I wanted to have a sense from Mr. Cunha what the effect is on the ground of that, because we're proposing that now within the town manager budget for this year. And I'm inclined to support that. I am aware of the study. But just for public record, what can we see on the ground due to the idea of both adding 2 in the past and adding 2 more if we're able to do so this year?
Councilor Costello, I'm going to ask Alan who could speak more specifically to that. I mean, I can tell you in big chunks, it's been a great help, but we're still not there yet. But Alan, if you could address that.
Yeah, what the goal is to, well, let me back up. Over the past few years, we've upgraded and improved and added to our facilities, such as Sherwood Park. We improved that quite a bit. Police Cove Park, we never used to maintain that. Latham Park, it's up substantial in improvements compared to what it used to be. The middle school, if you haven't taken a look compared to what it was 2 years ago, big difference. Things are becoming much more labor intensive. We also have Rhode Island DEM Phase 2 stormwater mandates that we have to maintain and clean our catch basins that we haven't been doing. And this past year and this year currently, we're being very proactive cleaning those catch basins and trying to make sure our stormwater infrastructure is in good shape. So there's a lot of things that are new that have happened over the past decade. And it's basically to fill the void that, just keeping up with recreation, lining fields, taking care of the softball, baseball fields. A lot of that's a lot of work. So the added people are to basically fill up those positions to take care and maintain what we go.
I agree with that. And what do you think of the current needs going forward as we potentially add two more this year that you'd like to see addressed by the increase?
Well, my biggest concern going forward is the middle school. And, you know, when the taxpayer drives by and sees what they spent $60+ million, I know it's not inside is what they're looking at, but outside, I'd like to be representative of what everyone paid for. And maintaining, keeping it up, the ball fields, the playing fields, just to keep everything in good shape. And it's very labor intensive over there now. And to be honest, even with two more guys, I'm concerned about maintaining that facility. But like I said, is making sure our playgrounds are safe. We haven't had the resources to go and make sure there's enough mulch underneath, every week or so. And I we're always trying to catch our tail to keep up with what's going on. But there's a lot that goes on at DPW, and a lot of those things we'd like to get addressed.
Can I follow up on Carl's question, Alan? Do you have a sense of how much, if any, these new personnel, both the ones recently hired and the proposed two, will assist with the tree cutting? Because that's a significant. We're way behind on that, I know.
Yeah, the tree program is one of the most, I want to say, requested services we have from our average residents. We only have one bucket truck, and we have two licensed arborists. But one arborist is only certified to work within 5 feet of power lines. And if you think of where the town trees are located, they're all within the power lines for the most part. And that alone is a dangerous task. I mean, it's not just going out in your backyard and cutting a tree down. We're working, the road is below you, the house is to the right of you, and above you is the power line. So these gentlemen have a tough task, and we're lucky. Our head arborist, he's a former he was in the private sector. He actually was up in Maine and Canada during the ice storms in the late 90s and early 80s. He's top notch, but he's getting up there in age, and we do have a couple younger guys looking forward to doing it. And like I said, I have to make sure they're certified by National Grid to work within the 5 feet of the power lines. So will it help? Yes, it'll help, because it'll help with a ground guy as needed if we need a third or fourth guy to help take a big tree down. But they are, well respected in town, and most people do think they are worth their money.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt, Carl. It was a question I had as well.
I absolutely agree. Thank you, Mr. Corby.
Yeah, if I could also add one thing. DPW here is very unique. We wear a lot of hats. If you go to other communities in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, you have separate sewer divisions, separate parks and grounds divisions. Schools have their own maintenance division. It's all under one hat. And if you think about it, it's actually very cost advantageous. What we are able to do is we might have a guy who today he's cutting grass, tomorrow he's cleaning a catch basin, next week he's helped putting in a pipe, the following week he might help in our sewer division. So everyone's multi-trained for the most part, and they work well together. So you got a good team down there, and the two additional bodies will help a lot if that's approved.
Anything else, Carl?
Yeah, with regard to tree planting and tree maintenance in the DPW budget, it is on page 19. Towards the bottom, it says the third and fourth bottom items.
Okay.
So we have right now in the town manager's proposed budget, 8,500 for planting, 15,000 for maintenance. I intend to move to increase the 8,500 for planting to $17,000. and maintenance to $22,000. These numbers are based upon an extended discussion and a detailed analysis by the Barrington Conservation Commission. The tree warden was present at the last meeting that they had. It is also in line with their request, the direct request that they made to the Committee on Appropriations. And I would note that it's a very small item in the context of the entire budget, but we have tremendous benefits by more tree planting and better tree maintenance in town. First of all, we've lost a lot of trees due to storms and the weather we've had over the last year. We have in fact planted more than we took down. But the problem is when you take them down, they're usually big, and when you plant them, they're tiny. And so on the whole, we're losing canopy. That means that that's not good for environmental resiliency. That's not good for beautification. And I think there's a lot of support, and I hate to rely on anecdotal evidence, but just talking to people while I was campaigning, I think people want to see an improvement in our tree planting in town. I think with the addition of 2 DPW workers, we'll be more equipped to do that and to plant appropriate trees that are roadside. I will also note that according to our tree warden, the cost of trees is increasing this year and it's gone up. So a level funding would not be appropriate for that reason either. So in short, to maintain or improve or get back some of the canopy we've lost, to support environmental resiliency, and just overall for the beautification of the town, I'm going to support doubling those budgets from last year, from $8,500 this year to $17,000. They proposed $15,000 to $22,000. Last year we spent $11,000 on maintenance, and that will be the content of my motion. As I note, we do have a member of the Conservation Commission, at least one here, who may be able to speak to that during any potential public comment.
Sure. So let's do it this way. I'm going to suggest that it sounds as if you are making a motion to add $8,500, excuse me, $5,000 to the tree maintenance line to bring it to a total of $20,000. Is that right?
No, I'm adding $7,000 to bring it to $22,000 for the tree maintenance.
So let's do one line at a time. So,
sure.
Making a motion to increase the tree maintenance line from $15,000 to $22,000. Is that right? Sorry, Carl, lost you for a second.
That's correct, and I apologize once again for my internet.
Okay, I'll second that so that we can just discuss it. I know, unless a member of the council would like to be here. Rob, please.
Just a question for Mr. Corby while we have him on the line. If Mr. Corby, if the DPW had that additional funding, number one, what would you do with it exactly? And no specifics necessary, but what I guess what generally would you do with it? And then number two, do you have the resources to do more of that work anyway?
Well, no doubt it's an ambitious plan, and it's a good plan. If that's the way you guys would like to go, we can go that way, no doubt. The year prior that ended on June 30th, we only had $3,000 in that line item for tree planting. Average price per tree approximately $300. That gave us 10 trees a year. This $8,500, this is much better. It gives us approximately, I want to say about 30 trees, 25, 30 trees. Going to 17,000 would be substantial, give us 50 to 60 trees, depending on the species. Like I said, getting back into where these trees are located, roadsides, we have a limited right of way in town, and planting it's always difficult. So we always try to get a species that won't interfere with the power lines, and also won't interfere with underground utilities such as sewer lines. So we try to work with the residents and try to come up with a species that works well and not get too big. No doubt it'll help, and if the additional bodies with 2 additional bodies, this will no doubt we'll do our best to plant and try to get approximately 50 to 60 trees planted a year if that's the way you guys wish. The tree maintenance line item will help a lot. we have to bring in sometimes outside vendors with cranes, whatnot, to help with some large trees, or if it's entangled in power lines. But it'll also help maintain our nursery, which we're kind of neglecting a little bit because of lack of resources. So that will help definitely with the nursery and ultimately in the future, because we buy, I want to say, a smaller diameter caliper trees and allow them to grow in the nursery. And then this way in the future, we have trees at a reasonable cost. We can buy them for under $100 a piece and allow them to grow in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they look better in front of people's homes. So absolutely, it'll help a lot. But like I said, whatever you guys wish to do, we'll do.
Okay. Anyone else on the council? Yes, Jacob, I think you have your hand up. No. I know that Eileen Small would like to be heard if we can unmute her. Ms. Small.
Hi there. Yes, I just want to reiterate what Councilman Custle said, and that the Conservation Commission is just very in support of this increase. We've already talked about how much canopy has been lost, and it's just really crucial that we can nurture these trees in the nursery and save some money in the process, but also get them planted in town. And I can't remember, I didn't realize I was going to be attending this meeting today. I can't remember what the ratio is from number of trees that have come down to number of trees that have been planted, but I didn't think, I thought the balance wasn't in favor of the number of trees that had been planted. It's just, but even if that is the case, and there were a fair amount of trees that are planted, it just takes so much time to grow those trees and replace these old trees that have been pulled down. It's a very long process. And if we can make contributions now to the town, it's really going to benefit the town in the future. I feel very strongly about this. And we talked about the reasons, for carbon capture and resilience, and also for habitat, preventing habitat loss is another thing to consider as well, and beautification. And in addition to carbon capture, there's also a feature that trees help sequester pollution, so those are all the things I can think of at the moment, but I really just strongly encourage you to consider this. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that we've seen, and as we've looked, my colleague Kate Weymouth used to ask about this every month, and we always look bad in the winter because we don't plant in the winter, and unfortunately with storms we do end up taking down a lot of trees. So it's only in the spring that we begin to catch up and overtake. And I think that's what happened this year. We've actually planted more than we've taken down. Is that right, Jim?
Yes, that's correct. We're actually reporting to the council, good timing. We're actually reporting to the council every month, a 12-year running total. So over the last 12 months, how many have we planted, how many we've taken down? And the last 2 months, we've been ahead of the game.
Great.
And we'll continue to be ahead of the game.
But I love the idea that, and this was something that Kate talked about as well, which was that nursery idea, which is, one of those smart investment ideas. We had a little space, so buy the trees a little cheaper and spend the money. And if adding 7,000 really helps to nurture those trees and bring them along so that we can save some money, that sounds like a great idea to me.
And the thing too there though is we really do need the DPW's help with the maintenance, because there needs to be some watering done. It was a tough summer last year. So that's really important, and maybe some fencing to prevent deer getting in and chomping on those tender little trees. But yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, if I could add, one of the things we're trying to do to keep the trees away from the power lines and to save a burden on 50 years from now on Alan's predecessor or Alan's successor, is when we take down a tree and a resident asks us to replant the tree, we're trying not to plant it on the town right away, but ask the resident if we can plant it in their yard, 5 feet in. And it keeps it away from the power lines. In addition, that when that tree needs to be maintained, it's not the town's responsibility. We bought them the tree, but it's now your tree to maintain.
Okay. So there is a motion to add $7,000 to bring up the tree maintenance fund from 15,000 to 22,000. That's been seconded. Oh, Councilor Breyer.
I just have a question about what the manager just said. Is it clear to the resident that by moving it in, that the responsibility is then on them?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, Vice President Hung, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. That motion carries. So we are changing that line item for our purposes to 22,000. The next item is the tree planting, and Councilor Castel is making a motion to increase that from 8,500 to 17,000. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Conway. Any further discussion for the council? Okay. I don't know if Eileen Small wanted to be heard again or if that was just her hand up from before. Oh, okay. Okay. Vice President Hung, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Cassell,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. That motion carries. Now, did you have another area you wanted to address, Councilor Castel?
I have nothing. I have nothing more.
Okay. So that leaves me, I think. We got, I had a question, Alan, I'm glad that you're on. It's just on page 5. Jim was talking about in his memo, the increase in tipping fees from $47 to $50.50 per ton, and over the cap tipping fees from $80 to $90 per ton. What is over the cap tipping fees and how often do we go over the cap?
Well, we go over the cap every year, and that's basically a number set by Rhode Island Resource Recovery for every community in Rhode Island. It's a number based on per capita population per tonnage of refuse. We're approximately over the cap by nearly 1,000 tons a year. It's not a big deal. It's been happening for over 20 years. It's just it's an added cost. They're trying to get us to obviously more diversion of any kind of waste, and that way the tonnage numbers stay down. It's going to go up from 80 to 90 dollars per ton for the overage of the cap. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I believe the cap is around 5,000 for Barrington. I don't have the exact numbers. It's 5,000 and change. And like I said, routinely we're about 1,000 over, and we pay that additional $10 per ton. I'm sorry, the additional, right now we're $47 per ton, and the cap brings us up to, it'll bring us up to $90 a ton next year.
Okay.
When do we typically go over the cap? I'm assuming by your numbers after about the 10th month, whenever they start to count.
Exactly.
So we've got about 2 months worth of over the cap fees.
Yeah, and with everyone staying home, during this pandemic, it hasn't helped. I mean, people have been doing more takeout. That stuff's been coming home instead of going to restaurants. But to be honest, we're actually doing better than I thought. We're not that much over last year. So I think people are, recycling more. That's gone up a little bit. But like Jim said, we're usually about 9-10 months into the year, we usually hit the cap number.
which is better than most municipalities.
Exactly. We are one of the best at recycling and diversion.
I wonder, yeah, please, Rob, go ahead.
No, I don't want to interrupt a comment if you had something in response to what Mr. Corby said.
No, I wonder whether there, most communities go over that and how quickly, but go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so I was going to comment on the same item, not to change anything with respect to the budget, but more just for awareness purposes, and wondering if there's an opportunity in the next few months, if we happen to have a light agenda on a regular council meeting, to have some sort of presentation on how recycling in town works, and how I understand that these aren't huge amounts overall, and the town does very well, I think, comparatively speaking, but you know, what financial impact you know, improper recycling and things like that have. I think especially with everybody still being home, and with the recent implementation of the polystyrene ban, I think it's something that could be helpful if we could start to look for ways to have increased outreach for, you know, education on the recycling program. I've seen some of the DPW's materials. I think they're very good and they're very helpful, but you know, maybe a way to start a presentation with the council, hopefully get a good attendance and engagement at that type of a meeting, and then, you know, perhaps think of ways to take it from there and increase the communication and outreach for it.
Well, we actually, you're going to be seeing a mailer come soon with the help of Kim Jacobs, and actually a high school student. We put together, working with DPW, we worked together to put together, to put together a postcard with all kinds of recycling information on it. And we received a grant from Rhode Island Resource Recovery for it. And what that's going to do is that's going to be sent out as a mailer to all homes in Barrington. And what it's going to do is give updated information on recycling and just what you mentioned. So I think that's a good step in the right direction, and that'll help a lot. And we finally got approval from Resource Recovery last week, which was it took about 3 months to get approval, but luckily it looks like it's going to go, and we're going to stop mailing them out. And you should see that soon. I'm hopefully sometime this spring. So that's one way we're going to get to every home and try to get the word out. And we always welcome volunteers, and we also work with Resource Recovery at getting into the schools. The Resource Recovery does a lot of presentations at our schools, and the middle school especially, and all our elementary schools. And I'm going to tell you, that's probably the most bang for the buck, so to speak, because kids they're like little sponges. They take that stuff home, and I know my daughter, she's all over me if I throw something away and I shouldn't. And it's a good thing. So I think the kids are the best avenue to reach. And with a postcard, I think that's going to help. And Mr. Carroll, getting back to your question, yes, every community in Rhode Island goes over the cap every year. And, you know, we're working with Rhode Island Resource Recovery. We got some banners we're getting for free to put out a recycling center, and more public, I want to say, informational packets to hand out. So we're doing our best. And I mean, yeah, we could always do more, and we'll always look for ways to doing it. But we are pretty good at recycling. It's just a matter of how can we do it better.
So let me suggest, following up on Rob's question, Alan, that we try to coordinate the timing of that postcard with the town council meeting. We've done this before, Rob, and I try as hard as I can to twist the arm of our what is it, Third Estate, to ask Josh Bickford to put an article in, and he does. And I think if we coordinate those things, maybe with outreach in the school, and we make a big push all at once, maybe we can have a good impact. It's nice to, you know, I always say that it's good for the environment and it's good for our wallet, and conveying that message to people that the significant amount of money that we save as a town through recycling, you know, it's, what is it, doing well by doing good. So if we can, Jim, I'd like to sort of coordinate that with a council meeting with a presentation on recycling and something like that, and try and push it a little bit.
And I should offer, about 2 years ago, the department heads took a field trip out to resource recovery and got the tour of the recycling center and the landfill, and it's remarkable. So perhaps sometime this summer, when it's gonna have to be Monday through Friday, but if I can get the 5 councilors to take an afternoon off, we can try and arrange for a tour, because I think you'd find it very enlightening.
It is pretty interesting, and I remember some little things that Alan talked about. People would ask questions like, why don't we just get bigger recycling bins? And that would just save, because I have to take down 4 recycling bins. And Alan's point is, the little recycling bins are so that people, if they put stuff in there that they're not supposed to, the folks who come and pick it up will see it and throw it out. So they'll take that plastic, you're never supposed to put a plastic bag in there, and people will put a plastic bag full of cans in their recycling, and the folks who are doing it will throw that out. And in that way, we don't get a load rejected. So a little thing like having small bins so that they can see into it, well, it's interesting to me, maybe not to anyone else. Okay, so the other question, actually, it's not a question. What I would like to do, consistent with Jim's memo on the well, I love the idea of, saving money in the long run, is to add to our, Kathy, I think it would be the capital budget, right? And it would be under other departments, to add money for a well. So that would be, I don't know, under, maybe
Page
under
22?
page 22.
Yeah, municipal capital.
Yeah. Under town hall utilities, or where?
I'd probably put a separate
Right, in
line.
municipal capital.
Yeah,
Just adding to municipal capital a new line below.
yes.
That?
But under town hall paint and trim.
Okay, I will make a motion to add $25,000 to our capital budget in the municipal capital category under town hall paint and exterior trim for the purposes of a well at town hall. Does anyone second that for discussion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Costello. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about this? Yes, Jacob, please.
We had discussed doing this last year, and I'm curious why we can't put the well in now, rather than putting funds into next year's budget. If we can put the well in now this spring, it saves us from adding to next year's budget, and it saves a full sun season. It lets us switch to well this spring rather than waiting through another growing season.
We didn't do it last year for 2 reasons. We didn't have the funds because of the cost was higher than we expected it to be. President Carroll had reduced, I think, our water utilities in half, from 10,000 to 5,000, because we were going to get the well, and we just couldn't afford it, and the pandemic got us, and no excuses, but we just didn't get it done. I don't have the funding for $25,000 for a well this fiscal year.
Are there any areas where we're ahead in the budget? I mean, the financials show us pretty well ahead of the budget. It seems like we can do it with money this year rather than adding on to next year's budget.
The way the budgets, if you look at I could go line by line. I've done that a couple times, but I'm not sure where I could carve out $25,000. The ones that are below are usually the ones that, the seasonal type employees that are below. Kathy might, we could take a look and see, but I'm thinking the money's not there.
We also have a few lines that are quite over budget.
So we may have to have a vote to shift some money. I know that the manager can shift within departments, but it takes a vote of the council to shift from one department to the next. Is that?
Correct.
We haven't been doing that in the past, only so we can use comparative basis. Like, why did that account go over versus increasing a budget and saying, well, it didn't go over.
Mhm. Okay.
We use it as a tool to say, okay, it happened for one reason, or is it a going trend and they need more money in the future?
Yeah, I see a net surplus that's significant now and has grown each month. And I just think that we're gonna end the year with a pretty good surplus, and we could put the well in with that money by shifting it from one of the accounts that's under budget.
Jacob, you probably see a lot of extra cash in there right now because we've gotten, back in September, I requested $3 million from RIDE. We also got 2.4 million of the CARES funding. And next week, I'm going to be dishing out over $5 million in debt. That's from the big debt principal payment of 4.4 million plus the interest is due.
So you don't expect us ending the year with a surplus?
I do. I think we will end the year with a surplus.
But it's trying to target that number so that we don't end with a deficit. That's the trick, right?
Right, yeah. I think 25 for the well is a safe bet, and it gets us a season earlier.
Okay. Anyone else on the council? Okay. I guess we're ready to vote. Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Nay?
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. The motion carries. The next item is the money that we talked about for affordable housing. Let me get my motion. And this should go under, where did we say, Kathy? Under the capital. On 22.
Yes, it can go right under the well.
So right under the well. So I will make that motion, and then if we get a second, we can discuss it. I make a motion to create a capital reserve account in the capital budget under municipal capital to be known as the quote affordable housing fund, close quote, and to include $500,000 in this year's budget to fund that account to be used for purposes recommended by the Housing Board of Trustees and approved by the Town Council. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Castel. Now discussion. Anybody want to discuss this? Okay, seeing none, then Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. That motion carries. Is there, does anyone have anything else? Because I'm prepared to suggest yeah, Jacob, please.
I do. I had one other that I thought about, and it didn't make it into my written list, and that's to add $21,000 to the planning department salary line. And the reason for it is to then not take $21,000 from the Spencer Trust to pay the Spencer Trust administrator, and to pay that through the municipal budget instead. I think that the work is critical, but I think that we have such limited funds available for folks who need it, folks who need the support, that the town can support the administrator and the interest that we use from the Spencer Fund. can be freed up to support folks.
Okay. Anyone? I can tell you that the reason that we did that, for years we didn't. For years we didn't have a Spencer Trust administrator, and it was kind of stuck on Phil and whoever else was sort of called into it. And as we explored alternatives, and some folks proposed sending this to the Rhode Island Foundation, we found that they would be charging the funds, not just money for the, I'll get to you, Jacob, not just money for the finance, but also money for administration. And so based on that, we thought it would be a good idea to have a Spencer Trust administrator. And we thought it was, and our legal counsel agreed that it was a perfectly legitimate expense. I would also say that that our Spencer Trust administrator is worth a lot more than $21,000. She's a force multiplier in the sense that she finds funding from other sources outside the Spencer Trust. So I just want to put that in context. I don't want anyone to think that that money is coming out of folks who need it. They're actually getting more. I think she's probably more than pays for that. But Jacob, go ahead.
Your response isn't really aligned with what I'm proposing. I very much value the Spencer Trust administrator. I'm not suggesting at all discontinuing that. I'm expressing only that I think the town should pay for it. Not that it was inappropriate, just that there's limited funding from the Spencer Trust itself. And I think the town can take on the cost of the administration, freeing up additional money for the trust administrator to use. I'm not suggesting that there isn't value there. It's exclusively where the money comes from to pay for it.
I'm sorry if you felt that way. It was by way of context, Jacob. I was giving some historical context. And so we have the president of the Spencer Trust. Annalisa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would rather that we not have a conversation about one individual salary and the sources of income or the sources of funding for that. In my mind, that's a personnel issue. I also think, as we're going over some of the details of the Spencer Trust, we may have more funding than we believe that we have had. So I'd like to table this conversation if that's possible.
Okay. We can have some I don't even know, we didn't make a motion yet, but we can have discussion, then make a motion. Carl, please go ahead. Carl,
You just put me on the record for concurring with Councilor Conway, both in her assessment with regard to a personnel issue and also the funding. And I think we'll be taking a more comprehensive look at things. But I would concur with her comments.
Great. So Jacob, do you want to make that motion?
No, but just to say there's no other context in which we can talk about the budget for a salaried position. So if we're not going to talk about it here, that's fine, but it means we can't change where the funding comes from.
Okay. Okay, so any other comments, questions from the council? Okay. I will then make a motion to accept the budget as presented and, let's say, modified this evening, and direct that the town manager provide to the Committee on Appropriations any necessary changes to maintain a balance between revenues and expenditures. And I can read that again, Mary. That's just from the charter. I was just trying to make it clear that we're following the charter. So before we have a second, you want me to read that again, Mary? I make a motion to accept the budget as presented this evening and modified, and to direct that the town manager provide the Committee on Appropriations any necessary changes to maintain a balance between revenues and expenditures. Okay, that's my motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Second by Vice President Hum. Further discussion? Okay. Vice President Hum.
I'd like you to recap the line items that have been changed.
Yeah, let's do that. That makes sense.
Okay, so town council pilot program from composting, we're going to make a new line, and that's going to be $5,000. Tree planting, we're going to adjust that from $8,500 to $17,000. Tree maintenance, we're going to adjust from $15,000 to $22,000. We're going to add a line in capital for a well for $25,000. And we're going to add the affordable housing for $500,000. So we've added $545,500.
Unless there's further discussion, we'll take a vote. Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Nay.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. The motion carries. And now we are up to public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak for up to 3 minutes on any matter that was not on the agenda. Does anyone wish to be heard? Okay. Seeing no hands, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
President Carroll, just one quick comment.
Sure.
Our intention will be to get you a revised budget booklet like you received before. The council changes will be redlined so that the COA will be able to see the changes that the council made specifically. And the COA meeting to review the municipal budget is next Tuesday evening at 7. And I know President Carroll's a liaison, but I would certainly encourage the other town council members, if possible, to join that meeting in support of your budget going forward.
Great. And Carl, please go ahead.
Jim, I was just wondering, with regard to the well, are you also going to be sending an amendment to the town manager budget to make it clear to the COA that you are also requesting that? Or how does that work? Or is that solely through us?
Yeah, no, I'll make it. I'll annotate that that is a request from me that the council accepted.
Thanks.
And I would ask Councilor Conway and I guess Councilor Breyer is the other Housing Board of Trustees liaisons. If you could let them know that this is coming before the COA next Tuesday, I think it'd be great to have their support as well. Okay. Did anyone make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Okay. Vice President Hum, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Breyer,
Aye.
Councilor Conway,
Aye.
Councilor Castel,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. The motion carries and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night.